This is Real Estate Real Talk, a weekly podcast about real estate industry news that actually matters, hosted by some of the industry's leading agents. Here are this week's hosts.
Welcome back to another episode of the Real Estate Real Talk podcast. Our guest today is Marguerite Martin, one of RRC's webinar instructors, and we're going to be talking about building your referral network today. Marguerite, welcome. Will you please talk a little bit about how you got started in real estate?
I'm a Tacoma real estate agent since 2005. And I got in at the time, I had like a different job every year after I graduated high school. She was not, it turns out, like a triumphant employee that rose up the corporate ranks. I had a whole bunch of different jobs. Most recently, before I started selling real estate, I was hanging sheetrock for the local union, carpenters union. I just bought my first house and my realtor was like, maybe you should think about getting into real estate. Like, you might be misusing your skills a little bit. So that's how it all started.
It's funny how common that is. A lot of agents find real estate as their second career. So at what point did you realize that not only were you really great at real estate, but you were also well equipped to teach other agents?
Well, I mean, for me, obviously it wasn't exactly a second career because I was 25 when I started in real estate. So it was like maybe my 12th career, but I was clearly not like careering just yet. So I got into real estate in 2005, which was a good time to get in because there was a lot of transactional volume. Obviously, that was during a real estate boom. And unfortunately, it was followed by a real estate crash. And in my market, we had the highest rate of foreclosure in the state. It was a really disastrous time here. From 2008 till almost 2012, homes went from a median home price of $275,000 down to $170,000. Condos lost like 58% of their value. It was absolutely disastrous in our market. And I was young enough in the business and in life to not really know exactly how to handle that. But what was also happening during the crash, for those that were there, you might remember, is the rise of social media. And so even though I didn't exactly know how to survive as a realtor during that time, I did know how to use the internet because me and all my friends were on the internets. And so that was kind of trying to figure out how to blog for clients. 2008, 2009, that was just kind of coming up. How to use Facebook to get clients before there were even business pages. And so, I really give a lot of credit to the more seasoned agents in my market at that time who would hire me to write blog posts for them, to make their Facebook pages, to make their Yelp profiles. Like the teaching started for survival. I wish it was a better story, but it was just like, I have something that people more successful and stable than me can use, and I'm going to exchange that. And that's kind of how it started.
The real estate industry evolves so fast, which is one of the many reasons why staying ahead of the curve and always doing continuous education is so very important. How would you compare today's market to when you started in 2005, or even to the really tough years 2008 and 2009? How have you seen the industry grow and change?
Oh my gosh. When I got my license, I remember my realtor, the managing broker of my office, our manager had it was a very 70s kind of office. It was super old school. He'd gotten his license the year before I was born, right? Like, he was like this wise, crusty old broker. And he's still out there. He's still closing. And he had a sign on the wall in his office that said, "Dear God," it was a realtor's prayer, "Dear God, give me one more boom market. I promise I won't piss it away this time." And I was like, what does that mean? Like, what is he talking about? And now I get it. It's boomed a couple times. It's kind of busted a couple times. And obviously the way it busts for the clients on the client side and the way it busts for us is sometimes a little different, right? Because for us, a bust might just be lower inventory and increased competition and lower transactional volume, right? Good for us isn't always good for our clients, and bad for us isn't always bad for our clients. I've learned that in order to have a successful and consistent business that takes care of you, you have to figure out how to thrive no matter what's going on. And that is the game. That's the real game.
You recently hosted an RRC webinar about diving into the powers of referrals. So at what point in your career did you realize how significant referrals could be to make a business thrive?
It was around 2011 when I switched brokerages, and it was, in the depths of the darkest times here in the market. And at the time, it was very difficult to sell a house, a listing. And I just decided when I switched brokerages, I wasn't going to do any more listings. It was a really heartbreaking time. I'd been to so many sad listing appointments where people were upside down. A lot of the market was short sales. I didn't want that life. And I was like, I'm just going to, I think I read an article in Realtor magazine about someone who specialized in just buyers. And I was like, I can do that. And my broker was like, you kind of got a list to last. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to do this. And I was also doing a lot of blogging and online lead generation, but that wasn't very common. So he wasn't really checking in with me about it. And then one day, like a year down the road, he asked me like, when someone emails you on the internet and they have a listing, what do you do? And this is so embarrassing to admit now. But I said, I just ignore them. And he was like, that is insane. Like, why aren't you referring? And I was like, well, I tried that once and nothing really happened. And it was so awkward. Like the conversation was so weird. And like, it was just uncomfortable, frankly. Like thinking back on it now, I was in my early 30s. Like I just didn't know how to have the conversation. I didn't have the confidence. And it's so funny to think of now because he was just like, he was exasperated. He grabbed a stack of referral forms. He showed me how they worked and he like kicked me out of my office. He's like, I don't want to talk to you about anything until I see like referrals to other agents in this office that know what they're doing on listings. Like take advantage. Like that's, people spend a lot of time and a lot of money generating listing calls and you're ignoring them. So it's not a very flattering story, but it was truly, it just took a little bit of force into the discomfort of learning how to have that conversation to get me to start referring listings. So from 2010 to 2015, most of the referrals I sent were sellers because I didn't work with sellers. And that was when they first started to close. That was when it really clicked for me. And the excitement, once I realized they were going to close, of like, if my friend or my past client calls me and they want to list their house, I get to find them the best. I get to find them an expert to sell their house. The person who I think is the most gifted agent in that market, I get to call them up and they're going to help my friend and they're going to pay me. Like once that all clicked for me, I really learned to love it.
I really like that perspective, Marguerite. You get to find the perfect agent out there to support your clients. What are some of the key characteristics you're looking for in those agents?
Yeah, I mean, I think philosophically, I believe that all clients deserve to work with experts. And I also believe that agents deserve to work with clients that like them and trust them. And most of the problems we have in our business are a misalignment on that front. It's a tendency of the clients to think all of us are the same. We all have a license. We're like interchangeable. And it's the tendency of the realtors when they business plan and when they take clients to be like, whatever, it's a commission. Like they're, kind of, I'm not going to say no because if I say no to this one, even though they're out of my area of expertise, they're out of my geographic specialty, maybe I'll lose business or I'll regret letting them go, right? Instead of doing what's best for them and giving them to somebody who's more expert in what they do. We're just so afraid that that'll have some negative impact on us. I mean, the very first referral I ever made, I went to the owner of my office, the same one with the prayer on his wall, and I said, I have this referral way outside my geographic niche, and he pulled out his CRS book. He'd been a CRS for years, and he said, we've got to refer it to a CRS. That's the person that's going to get it done. And I think the nuance I would add to that, because I think a CRS is like clearly it's a qualification, right? But even within that, many times, like let's say I'm referring to a market I know nothing about. Chicago. I've been there one time in my life. I know nothing about it. I mean, other than the iconic things about Chicago. And I have a buyer, and that buyer is going to spend $700,000, they think, in Chicago. And they don't know what neighborhood they're going to be in yet either. But they know they want a condo, right? So I have to not just find a CRS in Chicago. I have to figure out from the client, like generally, what kind of neighborhood do you think you're going to end up in? What's going to make you happy? And then talk to that agent. Do you have bandwidth for a buyer? Do you service neighborhoods that are like this? Where do you think this client's going to end up? They're commuting to this place, whatever, right? Like, and let's feel it out to do those vetting questions with the agent to find out, because I think the biggest mistake we as agents make is we go to a conference and we make friends with somebody and we go, oh, I know somebody in Denver. Denver is a huge marketplace, right? And it's like, well, I know somebody in Denver, but the person in Denver for the $2 million listing and the person in Denver for the first-time condo buyer, as much as we want to believe we're all able to do it all, who's done the most of that, right? So trying to figure out somebody who's not just capable, but is doing a lot of that business is going to be a real asset to the client. That's an additional layer of vetting that I think isn't just like integrity, although I think it is. There's some integrity there. But I think if you actually want your referrals to close, if you're like me back in 2011 going, these things never closed, Why bother, right? Like, it's because there's an additional layer of vetting if you want to make sure the client and the agent are really a match.
I really like one term you've used in your webinars, like you're basically being a matchmaker for your clients, making sure you're setting them up for success and pairing them with the right person to fulfill their needs during the transaction process. Likening this to matchmaking and dating, then, what are some red flags you see when it comes to referrals?
Well, most of the clients I refer, there's a conversation that happens. There's a Zoom call like this, and they're telling me about what they want, and I'm asking them lots of questions. And I've learned over the years to find out a little bit about what they value in a professional. Because as agents, we make a lot of assumptions about what people need. And sometimes clients still to this day like surprise me in their requests. And most of them, when I say, like, well, what kind of realtor would you like to work with? What kind of professionals do you generally like to work with? They'll get a little confused at first. And, like, well, I want someone likable and or not likable. They'll say, like, trustworthy, good communicator, right? Which seem like baseline things that they should expect. But we know once you've been in real estate for a while, you know why they're naming these things, right? Because actually, of course, not everybody is going to meet that standard, unfortunately, right? So they want somebody trustworthy. They want someone that's going to get back to them, who's going to tell them the truth. But then they'll start to add some additional layers, right? Like, well, I'm buying a house where I'm going to need to do some work. It'd be great to have somebody that has connections to vendors, right? Things like that. But there's another layer kind of on the dating matchmaking level that they're not aware of. I'll usually kind of explain it like this. Like, some people want somebody who's like very analytical, right? Who's, look, I don't need to be this person's friend, but I really need them to know their stuff and their numbers, right? People take that approach to hiring realtors, right? There's a distance. Other people are like, oh my gosh, no, this is my first friend in town. I need a life coach. I need a teacher. I need a mom, right? Like they'll be very, once you kind of start to explain the spectrum. And then sometimes you have a couple, right? And the couple is, one is analytical and the other one wants a BFF. And it's like, okay, to you two, who's the alpha? Like, who's going to be like spending the most time with the agent? Because that person probably does not exist, right? That is both of those things. That maybe there is the rare person, but for the most part, like, we all kind of exist on a spectrum. And sometimes I'll even say, I know somebody who is the expert in your neighborhood, who is the most brilliant marketer, who, if I was listing my house in your neighborhood, I would want to work with this person. And here is their personality. And it's nothing like what you're describing. Like, how do you feel about that? Can we look at some of their listings? Do you want to talk it through? Like, we will literally talk about dating. I'll pull up a few different people on the screen and we'll talk about it. We'll go through their listings and we'll look them through. And then they'll be like, sometimes they'll say, oh gosh, I really can't decide. But more often than not, they'll be like, that's who we want.
So, Marguerite, looking at your bio, it says you've been really successful in business, generating over 6 figures annually when it comes to referral income. What are the key systems that have made that possible to build up this big referral business?
Well, thankfully, like, just being in business a year after year builds on itself, because some years, if I'm honest, I mean, I know I'm on a call with a bunch of CRSs here, so I feel very self-conscious. Some years I am on the ball. This year, I'm firing on all cylinders. I'm doing all the things. I'm doing great. Other years, I kind of pull back, right? Like, there are years where I'm really doing a lot of prospecting because it's my full-time job. So when I'm like a year like this, I'm doing more prospecting than the average agent, right? Because I make a quarter of what the agent makes on my closings. I only take the referral fee, right? So I need to do more business in order to make a living. So prospecting is the thing. So I'm on YouTube, I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on, Instagram. And I also have a sphere of influence, right? I have an email list. I have all these different things, and I'm a one-person show. I'm doing those things myself. And as you mentioned, like, I also teach classes to agents. Like, part of how I have the chops to do that and the credibility with brokerages and with agents to teach them, because I'm over here in the trenches, like, doing it every day. I don't have a marketing person. I don't have anything. I'm filming, I'm editing, I'm writing. That's just my job. And I really enjoy it. That's not for everybody. But I think some years it's been very interesting to notice, and I know all realtors who've been in business, more than 5 or 10 years are definitely going to have noticed this. Certain people will be transacting. The following year, that line of business just kind of dries up, and somebody else is the transacting clients that year. So even with prospecting, it's like, if I'm not really paying attention to who's in the market and making sure that the prospecting is targeted at them, I can see a big dip. So there's kind of two layers. It's doing the activities that you always do, and also being attuned to who's actually in the market, and am I getting in front of them with the activities that I'm doing? There's like, and do I have the energy? Because I'm a human being. And some years I'm out there killing it, like this year, killing it. And last year, I traveled for 5 months. I was not killing it, right? So it just depends.
5 months of traveling sounds awesome to me. I think you killed it in certain respects last year too. But not every year can be the same. When it comes to referrals, it's all about maintaining client relationships, right? And I know you said earlier on you were kind of maybe the first generation to really dive into social media and blogging, all the fancy technology that maybe other agents weren't attuned to yet. Can you explain a little bit about your background in maintaining that sphere of influence and the different strategies and tips that you've adopted to really make sure you're staying connected with those prospects?
Well, I think the first thing I would say, and again, I know I'm talking to CRSs here, and in my mind, and you can just correct me if I'm wrong, but in my mind, a CRS is going to understand relationship marketing and they're going to be prioritizing their sphere and systematically contacting their sphere. And I will confess to you that while I was very good at finding strangers on the internet through blogging, through Facebook, through all these things, I did not even have a sphere of influence list until I want to say 2013. And I started in 2005. I mean, I started one, just like many people, right? Started a list a few times, but did not actually like sit down. My manager, different manager, Jasmine Jefferson, shout out, power hours, had a power in the office, headphones on. Y'all are sitting your butts in those chairs and you're not getting up until you have a sphere of influence list, right? That was the greatest thing she ever did for me. And now I do this to other people. So, and like sitting down, name, address, phone number, house anniversary in a Google Sheet, and going back through all of those MLS records and having to do the thing that I'd been avoiding doing, seeing where people I hadn't stayed in touch with had listed with somebody else. Not a ton, but it did happen a little. Like there's a reason I think agents procrastinate on beginning that process. But I only say this, I know I'm talking to CRSs that get this intuitively, but just in case anyone is listening who's like, I want to hear about blogging, I want to hear about search engine optimization and, AI, SEO and all of these things. It's like, yeah, that stuff is so juicy and it's so interesting and it does work. But I was an idiot for not first working the conversion rate on the people in my life and my past clients is so much higher. The labor required to get clients from those people is so much less. The expense is so much less, right? Like it's just, I just want to make sure to emphasize that before I talk about any kind of technology.
I think that's really useful for agents to hear. You entered the business not thinking you really needed to maintain those relationships, and it took you a couple years to realize your life would be so much easier if you just worked from that pool that you already had, that you already did all that work to create and build. Aside from that realization, are there any other misconceptions that you would want a new agent to watch out for?
Well, even just like not having a sphere till 2013, I have a lot of compassion for young Marguerite who started at 25 years old and then experienced a crash. And we were scrapping for clients back then. And until, some of the tax credits from Obama and those things started kicking in like 09, 2010, there was like a little first time buyer wave. And those were like people my age. And but my peers were not buying houses when I started selling real estate. So the idea of my peers being a source of clients for me just didn't compute. And yet my very first listing was my best friend was a nurse and it was somebody she worked with at the hospital listing their house and you should hire my best friend. And they did, my first deal. Even intellectually, I think I was too smart for my own good, thinking my sphere of influence was just not valid and not really understanding that it's not just the people it's the people they know. And to show up, especially when you're new, like the biggest advice I have with the newer folks or younger folks is, especially if you're with a brand in your market that has credibility, we all want to have our own personal brand and our own logo and all of that. But it's like, especially if you're new, if you are paying for any kind of marketing for a company that has credibility, you need to be sending stuff out that shows you surrounded by that credibility that exists already, because clients will think like, oh, okay, like they've been taken on by this brand, they must know what they're doing. And you need all the credibility you can get when you're new.
So, how can agents become that person that a prospective client will call when they need a recommendation anywhere in the country, right? Maybe it's a client you've had before who is moving or a friend of a client. How do you become an expert in that?
Well, I think the biggest thing is to create that list and add to it. Every time you meet someone, that's a good connection in your community, every time you have a client that closes, whether you are the one that closes them or you refer them to someone else, you add them to your list and they get that regular contact. And one of the things, it's funny, we just did an office class today, so it's fresh in my mind, but that some of those set it and forget it things. So a monthly postcard printed, professional, that shows that you know what you're doing, just listed, just sold, market update, community information, like just something very professional that they may just throw in the trash. But on the way to the trash, they're like, oh yeah, Marguerite's still doing this, and she's doing it at a high level. And that monthly email, some of our companies subscribe to services that do like HomeBot or different services where they're doing market updates about neighborhood values or that home specific value or other things to do with that home. I think a lot of clients really appreciate those kinds of things. It can sometimes feel to me, because I love to do everything custom, I get in my own way a little bit. And it's like, clients, they need to be reminded that you exist and that you're still doing the job. And that's step one. And then the next is to let them know, like, part of the messaging is not just I'm the person that can sell your house, but I'm the person that knows all the best agents. And if I don't know, I'm happy to vet a realtor for you. And I think I said this in the class for the CRS folks, but like, it's really true that like we are better than regular people at picking realtors, right? If we're using our actual skills to vet an agent and make sure they have capacity, that they have expertise, that they have bandwidth, that they're a good personality fit for the client, no one is better than us to find a realtor. And once you have that confidence, you'll find yourself inserting yourself into more conversations about real estate that are way outside your market, right? Because it's like, oh, if your mother-in-law is selling a place in Palo Alto, like, why don't you let me vet a realtor? No, I don't know anybody, but I'd be happy to do some research and interview some people and find you someone good. Like, of course.
Have you had the situation where someone may say they're going to go with a seasoned agent, but then they end up working with a family friend who maybe just got into the industry? How do you navigate that situation?
I mean, ultimately, who decides who their agent is? It's the client, right? And there's been a couple of times that the two things that are popping in my head, they were different states, but very similar circumstances. It was the client that called me was the child or the grandchild. Grandparents have been in this house, parents have been in this house for decades, and it's time to sell, and they're quite old. They're moving into maybe like an assisted living situation, and they need a realtor, and who do I recommend? So I'm asking about the parents, but I'm not talking to the parents, and I'm doing my best to figure out who are they going to trust, because ultimately they're the ones that are going to pick. And both times it was like, sent them these amazing local experts with great portfolios of similar homes, and both times they like chose an old guy with a truck, I hope it's okay to say that, but it was like, yeah, it was just like someone kind of like them, like, and to me, that's my mistake. I'm talking to the kids. I'm trying to get a feel for what their parents are going to want, but I'm also thinking a bit maybe too much like a realtor. The thing that I would want is not necessarily what that client wants.
Are there any other common mistakes you see agents make when they're selecting an agent to refer to?
I mean, the biggest one is just going with the first name that you know. My biggest pet peeve, if I may just rant for a moment, is these Facebook groups where people are like, who do we know in Chicago? And I'm like, that is not vetting a realtor. That is not even like, what are you talking? Chicago is a giant city. Is this a buyer or a seller? What kind of price point are we talking about? What kind of personality does the client have? Like, what are they looking for in a real estate professional? And this is so important now, like on the cusp of everything that's happening with AI, because it's bad enough that our clients commodify us, which means they think we all have a license, we can all open a door, so we're all the same. And so what do when they identify us as all the same? They shop us on price. And we hate that. It makes us mad. And yet when the time comes to make a referral, we do the exact same thing. Who do we know in Chicago? It's like, you have to take a little time. That's the biggest mistake, is not commodifying the agents. Find out what's special about the client, what expertise they need, what kind of person they trust, what they're going to be doing, and then find an agent that is super excited to do that. Like, not just willing, if at all possible, like find somebody who's like, I do a lot of that and I love it. That's worth the extra time to get to that point. So if you're thinking of the CRS referral, like there might be, I don't know, 100 CRSs in Chicago. So it's like we have this list of 100 people. Which of these people specializes in first-time condo buyers in North Chicago? I don't know neighborhoods in Chicago, but right? Like this is the neighborhood. This is the profile of the client. Because that information might not be fully available in a directory, right? And this is the other thing is our company websites, our company directories, our various professional services do they allow for this additional detail? But then we get to the real like meat of it because like I just did a class about this today, like getting agents, even experienced agents with true expertise to reveal to the public what that expertise is like pulling teeth. Even if you are the king or queen of a particular part of your town, to get agents to say, I sell a lot of houses in this neighborhood. I'm really good at it. I know more about these historic homes in this particular part of town than anyone else. It is so hard to get them to say that. And because they won't say it, their clients can't find them. I, as a referrer, can't climb them. So I feel like a detective, right? I'm constantly up in these realtors' business being so nosy, asking them all these questions, trying to figure out, what do you love to do? What are you doing a lot of? Because they all say the same thing, which is like, I'll do anything. And that's how they get stressed out and burned out and sad.
Ha, that old-fashioned huge print directory came up in one of our previous podcast episodes, I think. Now, we do have an online directory and an app called Find a CRS, and it's really great because there's a list of designations and certifications that everyone has collected, and it pinpoints all of the specialties, even the languages people speak too. It's really useful. And we're constantly reminding everyone to update their CRS profile. And for this exact reason, because people who want to refer need to know everything that you've mastered. Do you have any other tips or suggestions for agents who need to upgrade their online presence to perform at the best of their ability?
Well, I mean, I think, the whole world, whatever profession you're in right now, we're in this time of like upheaval and uncertainty, right? I mean, has there ever been a time when you really could not predict the future more than like right now? But I think like one thing is really certain, which is our value is in what makes us unique and present and local in our communities, and figuring out a way to translate that into the online space so that people can find you is the game. And then people, humans, Googling or searching, right? But then also LLMs, right? Like your ChatGPT, your Claude, if it doesn't know what makes you stand out above your peers, it can't recommend you. And it is bananas the way these LLMs will niche recommend realtors. Like if you ask your Claude or whatever you use, who's the most progressive real estate agent in your city? Like it'll tell you. It'll tell you what it thinks. And it's going to be pulling from Reddit. It's going to be pulling from publicly available Facebook groups. It's going to pull from blog posts. So there's this arms race now of real estate agents and SEO experts scamming Reddit, scamming Facebook forums, planting information so that these LLMs will recommend these agents. Maybe there are agents listening that are paying for services like this, right? And so if you want to stand out for something that you're good at, you've got to say it. You've got to put it out there. First of all, I mean, cultivate it within yourself, but chances are you're good at something. Chances are you're part of a community. You have expertise. If that is not out there to be found, they might end up recommending somebody that's not as good as you, and that's heartbreaking. Don't let that happen.
For a real estate agent, what is the advantage of becoming an expert in a certain area rather than just saying you do everything?
Yeah, I mean, it's completely logical that people would value an expert for their situation. And we see it in health, right? Like if I'm having heart problems, I don't want to go to the family doctor. I definitely don't want to go to my dentist, right? Even though my dentist is a doctor and studied medicine, I want to go to a heart specialist, right? And I don't want to go to a generalist. If it's all the same to me, I'm expecting that specialist is going to cost a lot more money, right? And there's actually studies that have shown that when a specialist gives you advice, you believe them more than a generalist. So the value of the advice and there's less friction in everything when you've cultivated expertise, because that's an additional layer of trust with the client, right? Like that's so important. But it's not just having it. It's figuring out how to get that, put that information forward in a way that feels comfortable for you, because we're not all the same in the way we market. We're not all comfortable doing the same things. I'm not saying everybody needs to have a blog and a YouTube channel and whatever. Like there's a lot of ways to market, right? But you have to do something, and you have to make sure that you are out there with the community that you most want to serve. If not, somebody else is going to eat your lunch. But like one of the things I've really discovered over the years is the most successful agents typically are not the most expert. They are not the best people who care about their clients more. They're people that follow systems, right? They're people that just like don't overthink it and just get it done. And, they might be part of giant teams and be giving the client to somebody who's brand new and making 25% of the total commission, right? Like the people who love their clients and care so deeply and have cultivated so much expertise are often not the same people that are out there like boom, 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 boom with the marketing, right? And that's, I mean, personally, that's why I feel so good about what I do, because I get to find those amazing agents and put them with the clients, and that feels so good. But if you are one of those amazing agents, you got to figure out how to get over that hump, because your clients deserve you. They deserve someone who really cares about them.
Do you have a recent story you can share? Just something about finding the perfect real estate match for your client?
Oh my gosh. I mean, I feel like they're all perfect. It's such a pleasure every time. I mean, I will say one of the changes that is really happening in these times, like in these divided times, like I definitely get like those LLM ones where they're like, oh yeah, I just asked ChatGPT who the best real estate agent to sell my house in Tacoma would be, and it recommended you. Wow. That's like a miracle. And I'm like, do you know what I do? And they're like, it said, yeah, you're going to find me a realtor. And I was like, yes, that is what I do. That's excellent. That's a miracle. That's amazing. But like, I had a woman call me the other day who said, I'll anonymize this a little bit, but she said, I want to sell my house. And I want to make sure my realtor didn't vote for this person. And that's a very interesting shift. And I don't think that's unusual. I think like values-driven referral, like values-driven connections are really big. And that can mean a lot of different things. We were talking today in the class I was giving about how, for example, in one of the neighborhoods, and I'm sure every city in America has a neighborhood like this, which is like, it's like the battle between density and historic preservation. Like, can we get more infill so there's more access for more buyers? Or do we want to keep everything exactly as is? This tension, right? So wherever you fall on the values spectrum between density and historic preservation, you're cutting out a set of clients and you're, becoming very appealing to another set of clients, right? And clients will sometimes self-identify like, I want someone who cares about historic preservation, who will find me a place like that. Somebody will say the opposite. Like values are huge. And I think, as an industry, we're a little bit reticent to talk about that kind of stuff sometimes, but our clients are rightly wanting to be connected with people who share their values. It seems logical to me.
Oh, how interesting. I can see that. Clients want someone who shares their values even more so than maybe choosing the top agent. They want someone who they feel aligned with, of course.
Yeah, and it'll differ market to market. I'm thinking about how, there's a stat about how in Washington state, we get, about 20,000 people from the state of Texas every year. And I talk to a lot of those people because I specialize in relocation. And, they have a certain, like vibe. And we send about 21,000 people to Texas every year. We're basically swapping populations, right? And I bet those people are a completely different vibe. I bet the agents on the other end talking to the Washingtonians moving to Texas are having very different conversations than the conversations I'm having with Texans moving to Washington. And just multiply that times the entire country, right? And even if I'm talking to an agent in Texas with whom I have not a lot in common on values, I bet we could have some really juicy conversations about relocation, intercepting clients through their process, and providing like really good, useful information for them as they figure out where they're going to fit in their new area.
That's fascinating. I would love to read a study on that. Over time, over generations, how different populations change, demographics change, and how that affects the real estate industry.
True. It's true. I mean, it used to be like, Facebook marketing was very edgy. Like I remember realtors being like, Margaret, you're spending a little too much time on Facebook. You should spend some time in your sphere. And you know what? In retrospect, they were right. I probably should have spent a little more time on my sphere. But now it's like, I mean, Facebook is where the baby boomers are. That's where you go for the people that have equity, right? If you want to do, like, if you want to market to the like establishment, that's Facebook. And if you want to find the next generation, like you're going to have to go somewhere else. And I think that's very interesting how those things change. And the expectations, the way that as millennials, the largest generation in home buying history, in theory, they were a little bit shut out, but like their expectations and their desires for homes were different than what the Gen Xers and what the boomers had been looking for. And it's going to be so interesting to see, if Gen Z is able to afford a house exactly the way that they're different, right? Like, but what do they value about us? It's going to be expertise and accessibility and like humanity and like showing up in ways that build trust with them. So really thinking about, am I putting those parts of me forward in a way that I'm comfortable with?
So, not to get too into the weeds, but I'm really curious about your process and your system. If a client comes to you looking for an agent, what is the step-by-step process? How would you first start your exploration of their needs and their wants? And how do you match that with the perfect agent?
Well, yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, the majority, like I have a niche, which is buyers relocating to Tacoma. Somehow, this is just powerful, right? Like as far as niche marketing, like I attract a lot of people relocating to Tacoma from various parts of the country, but 50% of my closings last year were sellers. And I don't talk to sellers at all. Like I haven't listed a house since 2010. You don't want to know what I think about the listing. I don't know, right? So what I know on the back end here is that I need to be very involved in the agent community and knowing who's good at all these different types of clients that I seem to be attracting in. So I do a lot of work up front, people at different companies, because sometimes the client will say, I'd like somebody at a couple of different companies. Like I need to make sure that I know a lot of different people and I know what they're really good at. And then I know their personalities. There's kind of that layer. And then on top of that, like sometimes I'm talking to the client and most of the time they know what I do. They're excited to talk to me because they've watched my videos. They know who I am. They've already, if I made them angry or repelled them in some way, they never even reach out, right? By the time they've reached out to me, they already know me. And so they're just telling me their story. And then I get to start asking them, well, like, what are you looking for? And sometimes they'll just be like, I don't know, whatever you tell me. And I'm like, let's dig around a little bit more. Right. And the real challenge is when it's somebody who's looking for someone out of area that I don't know. And I have to say, okay, I'm going to go and look for them and then come back to you and make you an introduction. But most of the time people show up saying, I want to move to this area. This is how much I have to spend. Help me find someone good.
We mentioned the difference in different generations before, too. Does the agent you choose for a client depend on that at all? Like, if you're matching an agent with a millennial, do you find someone a bit more tech savvy?
And I wish this was so cut and dry, right? But most agents or most clients to their credit, they don't have gender preferences and they don't have age preferences. You know, I try not to ask, but like I ask general questions to give them the opportunity to say whatever it is that they want. And they generally don't have those kinds of preferences and they're not making assumptions, right? And even within real estate, right? Just because you've got some gray in your hair doesn't mean you're an experienced realtor. This could be, like you say, second or third, that could be a brand new agent that looks very experienced. And that newish looking agent might have been in for 10 years and grew up in a real estate family and knows this place back and forth, right? Like so much within real estate doesn't meet our assumptions. And I think clients are kind of open to that. I think the bigger thing is like what you said about tech savvy. I do relocation. So a lot of people are searching from afar. So I do need to make sure that the agents know how to do a video tour, know how to do proper e-signing and all that. And that used to be like a real skill that I had to like kind of look for. These days, most especially agents that are looking for referrals, like they know how to do that stuff and they're like demonstrating those skills.
It's great that so many agents are adopting the new technology, and especially with the help of AI tools, it's easier than ever to become good at those things. Now, for the referral business, how do you see it evolving and changing in the next few years?
Oh my gosh, I wish I knew. Like, if I'm just like really honest, I am doing the best I can. Like I say, firing on all cylinders, like planting my seeds everywhere I can think. And I mean, who knows? There have been so many changes in our industry in the last few years. And so I think a lot about like cultivating my skills and staying really sharp and also cultivating relationships. Because when things change, my accountant was teasing me yesterday saying, pivot, pivot. Like we're all talking about that. But it's like, are you ready to move to where the clients are, to do the kind of work that is needed from you? You know, when the crash happened in 2007, you know, I remember like we had the same agent that was number one on our sales board every year for years. And that year, you know, she was a builder. She had a lot of new construction listings. Those were not moving. And someone completely different was number one on the board. And he had figured out who was still transacting, how to get in front of them. And he was doing those deals while everybody else was still just like, what is happening? And I think whether it's AI or big economic changes or legal changes within the industry, when things shift really quickly, like how ready are you to look at, okay, well, who is still transacting? How do I make sure I'm the best to work with them? Do I have the skills that they need? I'm thinking about like when sales and REOs were on the upswing, like who skilled up and who got in front and did what they needed to do so that they could do those deals. That's the way that I think. And hopefully, like, you know, there always seems to be a real estate industry. There always seems to be realtors, but what we do has changed a lot. And are you ready to do what needs to be done?
That's really great advice, Marguerite. I'm going to ask you for more advice. If an agent wants to improve not just their referral business, but their overall business immediately, what is the first thing you would tell them to do?
I think the way that I've been thinking about it, I think it would be to build confidence in yourself that you have a flexible brain that can learn and change. And what do you need to do to prove to yourself that you have that? And like, I had a little bit of a crisis with this last year, and I like bought a plane ticket to Taiwan and took Mandarin lessons for 4 weeks. That was my solution to this crisis of, am I about to be irrelevant? Now that's weird. Not everyone's going to take that approach, but it might just be like another designation or, hey, you know what? I'm gonna watch some YouTube videos and learn what vibe coding is. And I'm gonna vibe code a silly little website for my clients. And that sounds, I hear that maybe through the ears of somebody who has no idea what I'm talking about. But like you say, we have AI now. You can literally go to your phone and go, hey, Claude, what's vibe coding? And if I wanted to learn how to vibe code a silly little website for my clients in the next week, like, what would I have to do to learn that? And it's going to talk you through it until you understand. And I think we're not accustomed yet to how empowered we are to learn. But I think that the hard part of that is what we seem to be doing in the real estate world is outsourcing our critical thinking. Like, instead of saying like, wow, this thing can help me learn and grow faster than other people, we're going like, oh, good, now I don't have to do all that thinking. Make my listing description for me, write my blog post for me, edit my video for me. And it's like, okay, that's a race to the bottom. You need to be making your brain bigger with this stuff.
Yeah, we were discussing red flags earlier. That's for sure one for me. Like if you see a listing that looks like it was completely done on AI and there's no personal touch to it whatsoever, that seems like a red flag.
I mean, I love us. I love realtors. We are, we're so interesting. We're such a quirky business. And all the way back in 2005, and I'm sure for those listening who've been in business longer than me, there have always been the people that kind of do the bare minimum or, like I'm thinking about when I started, it was photocopying your postcards on colored paper, like listing. It would be a black and white printout of your listing photo on fuchsia colored paper, and then you like cut it into quarters and stick a stamp on it. And that's my just listed postcard, right? And of course, we didn't have digital printing back then. There were reasons, but like, or, sending recipe cards instead of market information, right? It's like, okay, yes, you are staying in touch with your clients, but are you providing them with information that shows that you're a likable, trustworthy, competent professional, right? Like those are different things. And I think that the thing is the agents don't realize is there is a kind of discernment that our clients have around AI that if you haven't developed it, you might be putting out things that are very embarrassing and thinking you're slick. And this is something that, you've got to really cultivate your own taste, or you might be an embarrassing agent doing the bare minimum without even noticing. Your skills and develop your taste. That seems to be the thing. And don't outsource your thinking. Like, do your own thinking.
That's a great way to look at it. Don't outsource your thinking. So, as we wrap up for today, do you have one piece of advice that you wish every real estate professional understood when it comes to referrals?
I think it's back to what I said at the beginning, which is that clients deserve to work with someone who has expertise, who specializes in the thing that they're doing. And you as an agent deserve clients who respect you, who you can serve really well, and filling your pipeline full of amazing clients that you love, who are what you specialize in, like that's your responsibility. Like that's the whole game of real estate is filling your pipeline with great clients. And in order to do that, you got to tell people what you're good at. Also, you have to be good at something, but I'm assuming anybody on this call is probably good at something. I think most of the problems in our business are not putting experts with, clients that need them.
Great. Well, Marguerite, do you have any final thoughts or advice for agents about client relationships or referrals?
I think keeping my ideal client in mind when I'm creating content and when I'm doing my prospecting, and really just something as simple as a market update. What does this mean to my ideal client, a relocating buyer? It's a different market update than if I'm prospecting to, sellers, right? Like, and I think most of us, we're not thinking enough, whether we're making an Instagram reel, writing a blog post, a LinkedIn update, like who are you talking to and what do they need to know? We're keeping things a little too general. And that's the biggest level up I can recommend is really start talking to somebody and have something to say that builds trust with them.
And if an agent is seeking referral business, or maybe after this podcast, they want to start getting into the referral business for the first time, what's the first step for them to make sure they're seen?
I mean, the first thing is tell yourself the truth about who you are and what you do better than anybody else. Have that conversation with yourself and then start having it with other people. In particular, real estate agents outside that niche. Real estate agents that don't want to do or can't do the thing that you do better than everybody else. Like take classes outside, just far enough outside your geographic area and build those relationships and get them to associate your name with the thing you do well. I have a friend, Stacy Staub, who owns Weston Main Homes in Denver, and she speaks at different conferences, and she has a goal of saying the word Denver 3 times every time she's on a panel. Stacy Denver, Stacy Denver, right? She just wants to burn it in people's brains. And I think all of us should be like that with our niche. Like, what are we saying what we do so that people will remember us and value us and recommend us?
I like that. That's very doable to make yourself memorable and build your brand and get in front of the right people. Now, thank you so much for your time, Marguerite. You've had a lot of great insights and a wonderful perspective about growing your business with real estate referrals. So how can listeners find you if they want to reach out?
Yes, I'm all over the internets. If you Google Marguerite Move to Tacoma, you will find me on whatever platform you prefer. Definitely hit me up on LinkedIn, at Move to Tacoma on Instagram, at Move to Tacoma on Facebook, wherever. I'm probably there. Not TikTok. She's still just a consumer, not a broadcaster on TikTok.
Awesome. Well, thank you again for your time, Marguerite. And thank you for your insights, all of your knowledge that you shared with us today. Thank you, listeners, for joining us. We'll see you next time on another episode of the Real Estate Real Talk podcast.
Thanks for listening to Real Estate Real Talk. If you like what you just heard, we hope you'll pass along our web address, crs.com/realtalk, to your friends and colleagues. Please leave us a positive review wherever you listen to our podcast, and be sure to check out our archive section on our website for previous episodes. This has been a Residential Real Estate Council production. Join us next time for another edition of Real Estate Real Talk.